Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the class Buddhism 305, Buddhism in East Asia. I hope everyone is doing great, and I received most of your midterm exam, your responses to the midterm. And now I'm not accepting anymore. So whatever that you have sent me, I will go ahead and grade them. And today is the week 7 of our program, May 15th, 2023. Okay. As I told you the other time, last week, that we are going to talk about today the Buddhism in China. One of the main topics of this class. We were talking about the Buddhism in India and the Mahayana Buddhism and all that. And now, how Buddhism reached China. You have to do a little research on this one. Perhaps you might have done before in one of your before classes. Anyhow, the thing that you got to remember is that China received Buddhism through Western India. When I say Western, Northwestern actually, Northwestern India, that is the gateway to Central Asia. You know, Central Asia is like the rural land. And I told you in one of the classes that the merchants, traders, they traveled quite often on this road, which was known as Silk Route. So along the Silk Route, you know, Afghanistan and Tajikistan and a lot of other countries in that area, like desert area, there are archaeological remains that merchants traveled on the Silk Route up and down. So while on their way, they took shelter in some places, and those places became centers along this route. And you will find archaeological remains in the sense that these merchants were Buddhists. So they went along with monks and nuns in their, you know, the group of merchants. They carried, or they accompanied one monk, or sometimes maybe more than one monk during their journey. So they took some residence in certain places, and as time went by, those centers became Buddhist temples, Buddhist monasteries, or Buddhist monuments, huge statues. You must have known about the Bamiyan Buddha statue and all those things. And on the Taklamakan, that region, a lot of Buddhist centers in the Central Asia. That shows that the constant and very busy Silk Route, along the Silk Route, quite often merchants traveled. So this is the clue that we have. Through them, it is because of these merchants and the monks who traveled on this Silk Route, that's how Buddhism reached China. Historically, that's what we believe right now. So it's a long process. So what type of, I mean, around what time we are referring to the reception of Buddhism to China? Some people say it's around the 2nd century BCE to the 2nd century CE. When I say this, you should be able to recognize what time frame. 2nd century BCE to 2nd century CE, like roughly like 300, 400 years. During that time, Buddhism had the chance of reaching the soil of China, Chinese soil. They have different stories about how Buddhism became their religion in the country. But it's very, very 100% sure that it came through Central Asia, India, Western India, and then the Buddhism that they received is not Theravada Buddhism. I told you this before too, not Theravada Buddhism. It is because of the King Kanishka. Kanishka is one of the kings that very prominent king during this time, and he patronized, he helped the Sarvastivada tradition. He held a big council, and after the council, missionaries also started, going, sitting on their journeys. And the Buddhism at that time, excuse me, Buddhism, which was popular at that time, was Sarvastivada Buddhism. So the merchants and the monks who were influenced by the tradition, who became fond of that tradition, they carried the message of the Buddha to the Chinese soil. So in the history, they have a story called Loyang. Loyang is the, maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong, but Loyang. That area is the area where the Buddhism became first. Buddhism reached first to that area. There was a very famous place called White Horse Monastery. So based on that place, later on, Buddhism gained ground in Chinese soil, and a lot of big history afterwards. In China, during this period, is called the Han, H-A-N, I don't know, Han or Han, maybe Han dynasty. During that time, Buddhism reached there, and at that time, the popular belief system in Chinese soil, in China, was Taoism. Taoism, and later on Confucianism also. So their Chinese thought is framed with the Taoism and Confucius thinking. So when Buddhism came to China, first they were reluctant to accept it. They did not like to welcome. But later on, they recognized that, oh, this is the same thing like Confucianism and Taoism. Some of the teachings, some of the practices actually, not the teachings, some of the religious rites and practices were similar to Taoism and Confucianism. So what happened in China, very beautiful thing happened in China. Buddhist teachings, Buddhist practices synthesize with Chinese traditional beliefs. And thereby, they were able to welcome Buddhism and recognize as their own religion. So even today, Chinese people, they practice these three traditions together: Taoism, Confucianism, and Buddhism together. In the same altar, they have these three traditions, the statues and things like that. So it's a mixture of everything, mixture of three traditions. This is a very important thing. You never find that type of thing in Asia and other countries. But in China, you find this very beautifully. They were able to manage this. They welcome these things and they allow them to grow in their soil. So Buddhism became so popular in China as time went by, following the introductory period. And the introductory period, actually, the most important thing is that translations. This is the very gigantic, huge project that they started. They carried books from India, and most of those texts were in Sanskrit. They started translating these texts into Chinese. Very big task. Perhaps the most gigantic translation project in the world. Translating Sanskrit Buddhist texts into Chinese. They started, so there are very famous monks, Kumarajiva and many others. They initiated this project, and they had a very systematic way of translating Buddhist texts. So please do a little research on this thing. I know some of you are coming from China, maybe, so it's very easy for you to do a little research on this thing. And then during the 7th and 8th centuries, Buddhism was so popular, and the certain dynasties, they patronized, they helped, their patronage, their help was very big, that Buddhism became a mainstream tradition in China. And you see, even today, it is existing there. And the other important thing that you have to pay attention to is that in China, Buddhism framed in a different way. Buddhism became changed its shape. Not like in India, Buddhism took new trends. As you may know now, Mahayana Buddhism is the Buddhism prevalent in Chinese soil, among Chinese people. So the Chinese people popularized their Buddhist practices, Buddhism in their country, by introducing new schools and new teachings. Very beautiful. So in China, actually, Buddha, the great master, Buddha became like a god. So people tend to, pray to the Buddha for good health, success, for money, and all other things. So that is a very new, during that time. It's a new concept that came along, because in India, nobody prayed for the Buddha for asking for good health or certain things like that, for day-to-day life, success. But in China, they popularized it, then it became so popular. And even today, you see that they light joysticks, joysticks, and placing a joystick, one or three sometimes, in front of the Buddha and pray. They request certain things, grievances, that practice is there in China. And also praying and chanting, very beautiful chanting methods they developed in China. What do you call, the Lotus, based on Lotus Sutra and other fundamental teachings that were brought to them from India. They popularized certain traditions in China. So Amitabha and these concepts became so popular, praying to the Buddha and just sometimes, chanting the Buddha name, Amitabha, 1,000 times or maybe more. That became a kind of popular practice. It's also a meditation. Later on, it became a method of meditating. This kind of things, they also became, Buddhist teachings became so popularized. People like to do, but rather than studying philosophy and other big things, if you can just chant certain mantra or certain thing to get relief, by doing that, you can even gain salvation according to their belief. Pure Land, you can be born in the Pure Land tradition. Became so, it was invented there, and Chan tradition, very popular tradition, very influential tradition in China. Chan meditation and Chan practices, a very big popular tradition there. So likewise, many schools or many traditions came along with the popularization of Buddhism. The scholars use the word signification. Signification. Buddhism becoming Chinese. As this process it was like six or seven centuries. It lasted. It continued, and even today, you find big monasteries, and nowadays, of course, be under the communist control. Buddhism, said not given the priority, but still it's there. So now your task is to do a little research. I just set up the background and information that you need. So based on this information, now you have to do a little research, because it's very easy nowadays. Go online and check how Buddhism reached China and how Buddhism became popular. What are the new traditions that were developed in or invented in China? If you do this thing, then you become so familiar with the Chinese Buddhism. Okay. So with that, I wind up today's lecture, and most of the work that you have to do at home. I just gave you a little guidance. So please do engage in a little research online. Go online and do the research, and I will give you a question also to focus. And let's go on from there. Okay. Thank you very much, and hope you can do the homework, and we'll see you next week.